Ethan Cole had always lived a quiet life as a mechanic on a small space station, far beyond the edges of human civilization. He enjoyed solitude and the predictability of machines. To him, machines were simple. They either worked or they didn't, and there was always a way to fix them. People, on the other hand, were complicated. They were emotional, messy, and often unpredictable. That was why Ethan preferred to keep to himself, content in the company of wires and circuits. Life was peaceful, with only the hum of machinery as his constant companion. That peace was shattered one fateful day when a strange message arrived. Ethan had been knee-deep in repairing a ship's faulty engine when his communication unit crackled to life. A holographic transmission appeared before him, displaying a symbol he didn't recognize, a swirling emblem glowing faintly in the dim station light. "Ethan Cole of Earth," a deep, commanding voice echoed from the transmission. "You have been named the rightful heir to the throne of the astral dominion of Velmoria by the late Emperor Kalen. You are hereby summoned to the royal capital of Velmoria Prime to claim your inheritance." Ethan blinked in confusion, wiping grease from his hands. Inheritance? Astral dominion? This had to be a mistake. He had no connection to alien royalty. He was just a mechanic. Assuming it was some elaborate scam, he ignored the message. But within minutes, another transmission arrived. This time, it bore an official insignia, and the voice was more direct. "This message is for you, Ethan Cole. Prepare for immediate transport." Before he could respond or even process what was happening, a beam of light engulfed him. His skin tingled as the world around him dissolved into shimmering particles. In an instant, the familiar surroundings of his quiet workshop vanished, replaced by the grandeur of a palace. The air was thick and fragrant with unfamiliar scents. The walls shimmered with iridescent hues, and towering figures clad in ornate armor stood before him. "Welcome to Velmoria Prime, human," one of the figures said, his voice low and commanding. Ethan was led through a vast corridor lined with intricate carvings, each one more elaborate and alien than the last. As he walked, he felt like a small, insignificant piece in a world far larger than he could comprehend. The armored guards escorted him into a grand chamber where 4 figures stood waiting. They were the royal daughters of Emperor Kalen, princesses of the Velmorian Empire. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, their skin shimmering with an almost ethereal radiance. They were tall, elegant, and coldly beautiful. When they saw Ethan, they laughed, a soft melodic sound laced with clear disdain. "This is the human our father chose?" the tallest of the 4 asked, amusement dripping from her voice. "A mere mechanic?" The others joined in her laughter, and Ethan felt a wave of irritation rise in him. He had no idea why he was here, but it was obvious that these princesses saw him as nothing more than a joke. "I don't know why I'm here," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady despite the growing tension. "But I don't find this funny." The tallest princess, her violet eyes glowing with intensity, raised an eyebrow. "Oh, it's not funny at all," she said coolly. "It's tragic. Our father, in his infinite wisdom, has placed us under your care." Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "Care? What does she mean?" Another princess, her silver hair flowing like liquid metal, stepped forward. "The will was clear," she said. "You are our new guardian. You now hold responsibility for all 4 of us." Ethan stared at them, disbelief washing over him. A mechanic tasked with overseeing the lives of 4 alien princesses? That was impossible. Yet as he looked into their calculating gazes, he realized one thing. His life had just become far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. "As I thought," Celia said, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. Ethan couldn't help but grin. "Thanks, I think." From that moment on, Celia began involving him more in her diplomatic work. Though she never openly acknowledged it, Ethan knew he had earned a small measure of her trust. While Zarya remained distant and often aloof, she no longer went out of her way to belittle him. The youngest princess, Lyra, was a different story altogether. Mischievous and unpredictable, she seemed determined to test Ethan's patience at every turn. Whether it was through elaborate pranks or cryptic riddles, She never missed an opportunity to keep him on edge. But Ethan, with his mechanic's resilience, never gave her the satisfaction of getting frustrated. Over time, he found himself actually enjoying their playful exchanges. Lyra's tricks, though often irritating, revealed a side of her that was far less guarded than her older sisters. She was still grieving their father's loss, but instead of shutting herself away, she masked her pain with humor. In a way, Ethan understood her better than the others. "Why do you put up with us?" she asked one day, her emerald eyes sparkling with curiosity. Ethan smiled. "Because I was put here for a reason. Your father saw something in me, and I'm not going to let him down." Lyra considered his words for a moment, then gave him a rare, genuine smile. "Maybe you're not so bad after all, Ethan Cole." As the bond between Ethan and the princesses grew, so did his sense of responsibility. He had been thrust into a role he never asked for, but he was determined to prove himself worthy of it. There was still much he didn't understand about the Velmorian Empire. But one thing was clear. His journey as their guardian was far from over. As Ethan grew more accustomed to palace life, things settled into a strange new normal. The princesses no longer treated him with open hostility, though a certain distance remained, reminding him that he was still an outsider. Nevertheless, they had stopped actively undermining him. In some small way, they had started to accept him. But just as Ethan began to feel like he was getting the hang of his responsibilities, a new threat emerged. One that would put everything he had worked for to the test. It started with a visitor to the palace. His name was Varos, a powerful noble from a distant sector of the empire. He arrived unannounced, sweeping into the royal court with an air of arrogance and authority that immediately set Ethan on edge. Varos had a reputation for ruthlessness, and rumors swirled that he had long set his sights on the throne. With Emperor Kalen gone and the princesses still mourning, whispers in the court suggested that now was his chance to strike. From the moment Varos stepped into the palace, Ethan could sense the tension between him and the princesses. Zarya, in particular, seemed to harbor deep mistrust, though she remained outwardly composed. Celia, ever the diplomat, tried to keep things civil, while Lyra's usual playful demeanor vanished whenever Varos was around. The quietest of the sisters, Ceres, kept to the background, her thoughts unreadable. Varos wasted no time in asserting his presence. During a formal dinner, he made several veiled remarks about the fragility of the Empire's leadership and the need for a strong hand to guide it through turbulent times. His words were wrapped in diplomacy, but the underlying threat was clear. "You must understand, Princess Zarya," Varos said, his voice smooth but laced with condescension. "The Empire is vulnerable. Without firm leadership, outside forces, pirates, rebels, rival empires will see Velmoria as weak. A more experienced ruler might be necessary to safeguard the throne." Zarya's violet eyes narrowed, but she maintained her composure. "The Empire will be fine under our leadership," she replied coldly. "We have no need for outside interference." Ethan, seated at the far end of the table, could feel the tension mounting. Varos wasn't just making conversation. He was testing the waters, seeing if he could push the princesses aside. Varos leaned back in his chair, smiling as if Zarya's words amused him. Of course, he said dismissively. "But one must consider all possibilities, Princess. After all, leadership is not just a title, it is a responsibility. And sometimes those who hold power must make difficult decisions, for the greater good." Ethan's stomach tightened. This wasn't idle talk. It was the groundwork for something far more dangerous. He had seen enough power struggles, even in his small mechanics world, to recognize when someone was positioning themselves for a takeover. But this wasn't a dispute over a cargo shipment. This was an empire at stake. That night, as the palace slept, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. He found himself pacing the dimly lit hallways, his thoughts racing. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a strategist. But one thing was certain. Varos was dangerous. The princesses didn't trust him, and neither did Ethan. But what could he do? He was just a mechanic, out of his depth in a world of royal intrigue. As he wandered the corridors, he heard footsteps. Turning a corner, he found Sarah standing alone on a balcony, gazing at the star-filled sky. She was the quietest of the sisters, often observing rather than speaking. But Ethan had noticed. She was always watching. "Can't sleep either?" Ethan asked, stepping beside her. Saris glanced at him, her green eyes reflecting the stars. "Too much on my mind," she said softly. Ethan leaned on the railing, following her gaze. "You don't trust Varos either, do you?" She didn't answer right away. After a long pause, she finally said, "Varos has always wanted power. He's patient. He'll wait for the perfect moment to strike. And when he does, it won't be a direct attack. He'll undermine us, piece by piece." Ethan nodded. "I've seen men like him before. They don't like to get their hands dirty. They let others do the work for them." Saris turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You're more perceptive than I expected, Ethan Cole. Maybe Father saw something in you that we've overlooked." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. He had never asked for this responsibility. But now that it was his, he wasn't about to let someone like Varos destroy everything. "I don't know what your father saw in me," he admitted, "but I won't let Varos take what's yours." For the first time, Saris smiled. It was small, fleeting, but it was real. "Be careful, Ethan," she said. "Varos isn't the only threat. The court is full of enemies, waiting for us to fall." Ethan straightened, a new determination settling over him. "Then we fight them, together." Saris's eyes met his. In that moment, Ethan knew he wasn't alone in this fight. The princesses may not have chosen him as their guardian, but whether they liked it or not, he was part of their family now, and he would do whatever it took to protect them. The war room had become the epicenter of their fight for survival. Zarya stood at the head of the chamber, her usual icy demeanor replaced by a steely resolve. Celia was deep in discussion with the palace's military leaders, strategizing their next move. Lyra, her playful nature subdued, sat quietly, her emerald eyes sharp with focus. Saris, still recovering from the energy she had unleashed during the attack, remained at Ethan's side, her strength slowly returning. "We can't wait for them to strike again," Zarya said firmly. "The mercenaries will return, and next time, they won't leave without what they came for." Ethan nodded. "We need to take the fight to them. Whoever is leading these attacks is counting on us to stay defensive. We have to outmaneuver them." Celia glanced up from the tactical screens. "The problem is, we still don't know who they are. Varos is involved, but he's not acting alone. There's a larger force behind this." Ethan thought back to the cloaked figure who had led the attack. There was something more to them. An intelligence. A calculated ruthlessness. Whoever they were, they had access to technology far beyond anything seen in the Empire. "If they're working with Varos, we're dealing with a serious threat," he said grimly. Zarya's violet eyes narrowed. "Varos has always wanted power, but this is different. He's aligning with forces that could destabilize the entire empire." Ethan paced the room. "We need our own allies. There are still factions within the empire that are loyal to your family. If we can unite them, we'll stand a chance." Lyra finally spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. "Father's most trusted generals still command powerful fleets. If we can convince them to stand with us, we'll have the strength to push back." Ethan nodded. "Then we split up. Celia, keep working with the military here to reinforce our defenses. Zarya and I will reach out to the loyalist factions and rally support. Lyra, stay with Saris and protect the palace. If Varos tries anything, you'll be the last line of defense." Saris, though still weak, nodded. "I'll be ready if they return." Zarya turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. "You're taking a lot of risks, human." Ethan met her gaze. "We don't have a choice. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to protect." For a moment, Zarya said nothing, a flicker of something softer appearing in her sharp features. Then, with a determined nod, she said, "Let's get to work." In the days that followed, Ethan and Zarya traveled across the empire, meeting with generals, nobles, and key figures still loyal to the Velmorian royal family. It wasn't easy. Many were reluctant to join a fight they believed was already lost. But Zarya's fierce determination and Ethan's practical wisdom slowly began to sway them. One by one, fleets pledged their support, old alliances were reignited, and the loyalist forces began to grow. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Celia fortified their defenses, preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Varos's army. Rumors spread that Varos was assembling a formidable force, drawing mercenaries and warlords from across the galaxy to his cause. It was only a matter of time before he made his move, and when he did, it was with overwhelming force. The final confrontation came sooner than expected. Ethan and the princesses were finalizing their battle plans when the palace alarms blared. Varos's fleet had arrived. Dozens of massive warships hovered ominously above Velmoria Prime, their weapons bristling with firepower. Ethan rushed to the palace command center, where Zarya, Celia, Lyra, and Ceres were already coordinating their defenses. The loyalist fleet, though strong, was outnumbered. Varos's forces were vast and well prepared, and the battle that followed was nothing short of cataclysmic. Explosions lit up the sky as the two fleets clashed, shaking the very atmosphere. Varos's warships unleashed a relentless barrage of firepower, forcing the loyalists into a desperate fight to hold the line. On the ground, the palace was under siege. Mercenaries stormed the city, pushing toward the royal stronghold. Ethan found himself leading a contingent of palace guards, fighting to hold the attackers at bay. Blaster fire filled the air, the sound of battle deafening. Amid the chaos, Ethan spotted Varos himself. Flanked by his elite soldiers, the noble had finally arrived to claim the throne. His cold, calculating gaze was fixed on the palace gates. With a surge of determination, Ethan fought his way through the battlefield, knowing this was his moment. He had been given this responsibility for a reason, and he wasn't about to let Varos win. The two men met in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by the clash of battle. Varos smirked. "You've done well, human," he said, his voice dripping with mock admiration. But this was always going to end the same way. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon. "You're wrong. The Empire isn't yours to take." Varos's smirk vanished, replaced by a cold glare. "Then I suppose you'll have to die with them." The two clashed in a fierce battle. Varos was a skilled fighter, his combat prowess far beyond what Ethan had anticipated. But Ethan fought with a different kind of strength, the kind born from resolve, the kind born from protecting the ones he had come to care for. In the end, it was Varos's arrogance that proved his downfall. Using a mix of mechanical ingenuity and sheer determination, Ethan outmaneuvered the noble, delivering a final blow that sent him sprawling. The battle still raged, but as Varos's forces saw their leader fall, their morale crumbled. The loyalist fleet, led by the princesses, seized the advantage, driving the enemy into full retreat. Hours later, the smoke of battle finally cleared. The palace, though scarred, still stood. The Empire had been saved. Ethan, bruised and exhausted, stood with the princesses in the aftermath. The royal banners fluttered once more, a symbol of victory. Zarya, her regal demeanor softened by exhaustion, looked at him with newfound respect. "You've done well, Guardian." Ethan smiled, though it was weary. "It wasn't just me. We did this together." Ceres, now fully recovered, stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Father was right to choose you, Ethan Cole. You've proven yourself worthy of the title." Ethan nodded, a quiet sense of peace settling over him. He had started this journey as a simple mechanic, but now he was something more. Guardian of the royal family, protector of the Velmorian Empire, and a man who had finally found his place in a world far greater than he had ever imagined. The war was over, but Ethan knew the challenges weren't. The Empire needed rebuilding, and the princesses would need his guidance. But for now at least, the battle was won. As he stood on the palace balcony that evening, gazing at the stars, Lyra approached, her usual mischievous smile returning. "I thought I'd find you out here. Just needed a moment to breathe." Ethan chuckled. "It's been a long journey." Lyra nodded. "It has. But you did more than anyone could have expected. We wouldn't be here without you. Ethan shrugged. You all did the hard part. Don't, she interrupted gently. Don't downplay what you've done. The other princesses joined them, standing together beneath the vast, starry sky. You're not just our guardian anymore, Zarya said softly. You're one of us. Ethan felt his heart swell. I'll always be here, for all of you. Together, they had forged a new path. Together, they would face whatever came next. The end.